Hey everybody, welcome to class. We've got one chapter to talk about today, Acts chapter 12, if you will meet me there. We have been doing this survey of the book of Acts, taking our lessons in chunks. Today, we're just looking at Acts chapter 12, where we are introduced to a new character down here in Jerusalem. We have followed most recently Peter over to the city of Joppa, up to the city of Caesarea, back down to Jerusalem. That's where we are in Acts chapter 12 as we are introduced to Herod the king. We know him in history as Herod Agrippa. He was the grandson of Herod the Great. You might talk as a class. Herod the Great, back in Matthew chapter 2, was the wicked king who wanted baby males in Bethlehem to be killed because he had heard that some new king was born. The Herods were not nice, godly men. Here we're reading about Herod Agrippa, who in Acts chapter 12, verse 1, laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, one of the apostles. We'll dig much more into this as a class, but here we have, for the first time, an apostle losing his life for the faith, doing what was right. James is killed with the sword, and when Herod saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread, and when Herod had seized Peter, he put him in prison, delivering him over to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out to the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but earnest prayer for him was made to God by the church. Now, let's listen in to what happened in that prison. When Herod was about to bring him out on that very night, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers bound with chains, and sentries before the door were guarding the prison. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone in the cell. That angel strikes Peter on the side and woke him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off his hands. And the angel said to him, "Dress yourself and put on your sandals." And he did so. And he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And he went out and followed the angel. Peter did not know that what was being done by the angel was real. He thought he was seeing a vision. When they had passed the first and the second guard, they came to the iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them of its own accord, and they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel left him. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I am sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." When he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other's name was Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. And when he knocked at the door of the gateway, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. Recognizing Peter's voice, in her joy, she didn't open the gate, but ran and reported that Peter was standing at the gate. They said to her, "You are out of your mind." But she kept insisting that it was so, and they kept saying, "It is his angel." But Peter continued knocking, and when they opened, they saw him and were amazed. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison, and he said, "Tell these things to James and to the brothers." Then he departed and went to another place. You can probably imagine that when Herod found out about this, he was not happy. There was no little disturbance among the soldiers over what had become of Peter, where he went. When Herod searches for him and doesn't find him, he examined the sentries, the people who are supposed to be guarding the door, and ordered that they should be put to death. Herod doesn't stay here in Jerusalem. Verse 19 tells us that he went down from Judea to Caesarea and spent time there. While he is there, there are some who are in trouble with Herod. Herod is angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon. They come to him with one accord. They've persuaded a man named Blastus, the king's chamberlain, to ask Herod for peace because they depend on Herod and his people for food. Listen into what happened in verse 21. On an appointed day, Herod put on his royal robes. He took his seat upon the throne. He delivered a speech to them, and the people are shouting, "The voice of a God and not of a man." Immediately, Luke tells us, an angel of the Lord struck Herod Agrippa down because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. I want you to think about what we have been told just in this one chapter, Acts chapter 12. We have Herod the king who lays violent hands on some who belong to the church. Just when it looks like the persecution is going to let up, now we've got a king violently attacking the church. We've read about an apostle, James, the brother of John, who was killed with a sword. We have Peter thrown in prison. We've got a human king worshiped as a god. But I want you to listen carefully to what Luke tells us in verse 24. Despite all of that, the word of God increased and multiplied. What do we need to see and understand from all of that? We'll dig into it more as a class. For now, let me leave you right here in verse 25. Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had completed their service. What was their service? Do you remember? Why were they in Jerusalem? We'll talk about that as a class. For now, notice who else is introduced into this story. They leave Jerusalem and they bring with them John, whose other name was Mark. We're going to hear much more about those three men, Paul, Barnabas, and Mark, in our next lesson. For now, let's dig in as a class to Acts chapter 12. Thank you so much for being in class today. Let's make it a great one together.